Well, hello everyone. Welcome back, viewers. Here we are with Healing You with Gloria Liebecker. And my name's Gail Donahue, and I'm Gloria's co-host here on the show. And Gloria, the other day we did this really interesting process that you were helping me with looking at these two different circles and looking at what was my current reality and then looking at what I really love and where I really actually wanted to spend more of my time. And it seemed like there was a bit of a process and a structure behind this. So I'm wondering, I think it's something that our viewers would be interested in. Can you talk about this a bit for us?
Yeah, thank you, Gail. One of the things that I'm learning is that a process is only as useful as the result that it truly supports. So what is the outcome? And so without having a structural tension, then you wouldn't have any grounding. So what we did is you modeled beautifully the focus on what your final outcome is that you'd really love. And then you also were acknowledging what the current reality was. And when we can be really honest with ourselves about what's actually happening by using the power of observation and not putting filters of our own perceptions over the top of it, as we get better at that, we can end up making the process our own, and it'll be unique for everybody. But there are three aspects to this.
Could I ask you, could I ask you a question? What do you mean by that structural tension? Could you explain that a bit more, just so that everyone's clear on what that is?
Yeah, so there were two different structures, and we will get into that more later, but the one structure is your current reality. What is it that's actually happening for you? And then the other structure is when you drop into your heart and you acknowledge what you really love. And they're most likely different from one another.
Okay.
And so when you can hold them both, so in the demonstration that we did last time, you stepped into the current reality, you acknowledged that, you shook it off, then you stepped into what you love, you acknowledged that, and you noticed what that was like in both of them, and you stepped out of that too and shook that off. Then you sit there and you looked at both of them. That's actually the structural tension.
Ah, okay.
So when you can actually acknowledge both the current reality and the outcome of what you love and what you want, what you really, really want,
yeah,
you take the power out of what you don't want. You acknowledge it, but you don't make it wrong. You just say, yeah, that's my pattern. I've had that pattern forever. I recognize it. When you can recognize it and you can name it and shake it off, you can put that power back into what you love. And most likely it's not going to feel really comfortable. And so when we can begin to get comfortable with being uncomfortable, like for me, when I start to feel uncomfortable, I'm like, ooh, something's going to shift.
yeah.
Nervous, I can feel those things, and I can recognize my pattern without it driving my behavior. So,
Yeah. Okay. So yeah, that makes sense. And yeah, when I did step out, I could see the two, and I had a real sense of a choice being there, and not before doing that. It was, being drawn to like my pattern of going to current reality, because that's what I was always doing, just being pulled to that path of pattern.
yeah.
Yeah.
And so in that there's three aspects of that experience. Mechanics, like we actually defined them both, right? And when you define them, then there's an orientation in each one. So the orientation of the one to the left is recognizing this pattern that you have, where you really want something, but you get drawn into overthinking and overdoing, and each person's pattern will be unique to them. And then the other orientation was, stepping into your heart, into the spirit of what you really love.
Yes. Yeah.
And so when we can actually teach these principles, rather than having them be rules, when we teach principles, then people can begin to apply those into their own life. When we can learn something, we can learn how to apply it. We can have a little bit of success, and then we're encouraged with it.
Right.
Rather
Yeah.
than the pattern that most of us, I would say all humans have, is the belief we have creates the reality that reinforces the belief. So they're different paradigms.
Yeah. Can you say those two again, just to make this the belief, the one that most of us have is the belief creates
The reality
reality.
says the belief that creates the reality that reinforces. And so we get stuck in that spin. Well, there's a different spin. So that spiral dynamics, that would go down. And you did acknowledge that when you were in that current reality, it was a downward thing. And when you stepped into your heart, those dynamics are an upward spiral. And that is, you'll learn something and you apply it in your life. And then you have some success with that, which encourages your heart to learn. And so there's a new learning. When we, like you at the end, was beautiful. You said, oh, this is what I'm going to do. And I can recognize this and I can acknowledge it to myself. And at the end of the day, I will say, I did it. And that's it. And then I will continue to learn to follow through and apply it. And notice that I had success and I'm encouraged again. And that continues. And what can happen though is we're doing this and we're so excited about it. And all of a sudden, boom, you notice this pattern took over. And this belief starts to create a reality that's going to reinforce the belief. And, in an instant, you can come back into your heart and you can recognize it. So the power is in recognizing the pattern. It's like, well, of course, Gail is going to do that. Yeah. And acknowledging what it was like for young Gail. Just it can be in a heartbeat. It can happen as you practice this way of being and loving yourself anyway. You bring the light to that shadow part and you bring her home to your heart. And
I think that was something significant in doing the process that we did. The stepping into the current reality, it wasn't about making it bad or wrong or shaming myself or blaming myself. It was just, this is what is, and it was true. And it was the pattern of being in, but it didn't make me wrong. And so it was so much easier to then, after then stepping out of it, seeing where I wanted to be, where my heart was and where I want to choose to go to. It was so much easier to see both of them. And then, oh yes, I want to go there. And again, nothing about this other one being wrong. It's just what is. Yeah. And so I was just
personal. It's not personal. When we make it personal, we have the shame or we have the blame or those, but it's not personal. It's really acknowledging the reality.
Yeah. And so as we finish up for today, for right now, our discussion, what do you see that would be something that would be valuable for our listeners and our viewers to hear about for our next session?
Oh yeah, I'd like to give them something to that they can kind of reflect on, is really to recognize what are their personal rhythms, what are their personal patterns and tendencies and inclinations. And as you said, not making them wrong, but just begin to notice what they are, notice what's driving you. And when we pick up, we'll talk about the path of least resistance, because that's where the energy is going to flow, wherever there's the least resistance. So.
Well, that sounds interesting. That sounds like it's something very doable then.
It is.
Okay.
All right. I look forward to that flow of energy with you.
Okay. Thanks, Gloria. Bye.